Hey, thanks for checking out the track, brother. And hell yeah, I got you, man. So let's talk about mixing for a mastering session and then the mastering process itself. Now, disclaimer, I'm not an expert at any of this, but I get some pretty decent sounding home mixes, so I'll show you what I do. So the way I think about it, I want to get as much right at the source as I can. So the mixing process, I honestly view as like more important. I find the mastering process to be pretty simple if you've done a good job on the mix itself. So the engineering and the mixing, I think, is like the critical first steps. And if you get that right, then the mastering should be simple. Now, it sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on all of that. So there's two things I keep in mind when mixing for a master. That is leaving enough headroom for the mastering process for me to bring up the levels to industry standard. And number two is just the overall dynamics of the mix itself. So some people will wait until the mastering process to put a compressor on the overall mix, but I'll actually start by just putting a compressor directly on my master track here. Now you'll see I'm not bringing down a lot, right? I'm just bringing down some of those peaks, some of those highs, and evening everything out and gluing the mix together with this compressor. So it's just about gluing the mix together. Now, in terms of leaving headroom, you can see here, I don't want any of my peaks to go higher than about negative 5 dB. So between -5 to maybe -7 dB is a good spot to be. So once you have a good sounding mix that you're happy with and there's no like extreme peaks and there's enough headroom, just bounce down the entire track into a single waveform and then create a new project in your DAW and bring in that wave. You can also use a separate software, which I tend to do. So I use Studio One for the mix, and then for the master, I use Ozone 9. So you can see I just bounced down the track and I brought it into Ozone 9 here. Now you may choose to put some more compression on at this point. I found that there were no extreme peaks or anything like that, so I was good to go. So what I did was a very simple basic chain here just to polish up the track and then bring up the levels. So I did basic EQ, and then I did a dynamic EQ, an exciter, an imager for width, and then a maximizer. So I'll walk you through each. Now you can just use your ear, or what you can do is actually bring in another reference track. So bring in the waveform of another track that you like the sound of and bring it in as a reference and compare to your track, and then adjust EQ as you see fit. If you do decide to get Ozone 9, it has AI that will do this all for you, and it actually gives a pretty good starting point, but I usually make tweaks from there. So what I did is I just brought down a little bit of the highs here in the mix because I found they were a little bit piercing. Beyond that, I liked how the mix sounded, so again, I tried to get it right at the source. But then I put a dynamic EQ just to make sure some problem frequencies were not getting out of hand. Then I added an exciter to give it some nice saturation. Then what you want to do is make sure the track is filling out the entire stereo image. So you give it some width with an imager. Then finally, at the end of the chain, you use a limiter to bring it up to the industry loudness standard. And this is what you're shooting for. Really hard to cover in the TikTok format of under 3 minutes, but I hope this at least kind of helps, man.